The Salem Witch Trials of 1692 remain one of the darkest and most mysterious chapters in American history. Set against the backdrop of Puritan New England, these trials unfolded in the small village of Salem, Massachusetts, where fear and suspicion turned neighbor against neighbor. Over the course of a year, more than 200 people were accused of witchcraft, 30 were convicted, and 19 were executed by hanging. But what caused this mass hysteria? Were the Salem witch trials merely a product of fear and superstition, or was there something more sinister at play? In this exploration, we'll dive deep into the events, causes, and legacy of the Salem witch trials to uncover the truth behind this haunting episode, examining not only the timeline but also the societal undercurrents that allowed such a tragedy to unfold. We will explore how a community, once united by faith and common purpose, descended into chaos and paranoia, forever altering the course of their history. To understand the Salem witch trials, we must first understand the society in which they occurred. In 1692, Salem was a small Puritan village, part of a larger theocratic society that had been established by religious dissidents from England. Puritans lived strict, religiously driven lives. They believed the devil was constantly at work in the world, seeking to corrupt the faithful through temptation and affliction. Their theology emphasized predestination, the belief that God had already chosen who would be saved and who would be damned. This created a constant state of anxiety as individuals sought signs of their salvation while fearing any indication of sin or demonic influence. Women were expected to be submissive and pious, while men held authority in both the church and society. Daily life was hard, fraught with challenges that tested their faith and resolve. The community faced harsh winters, frequent outbreaks of disease, such as smallpox, and ongoing conflicts with indigenous peoples, who were often viewed as agents of the devil or instruments of God's wrath. These hardships bred a culture of fear and anxiety, where any misfortune could be interpreted as a sign of God's displeasure or the devil's work. Superstition was rife, and the line between the natural and the supernatural was often blurred. Religious fervor and a belief in the supernatural were deeply ingrained in Puritan society, making them particularly susceptible to the idea of witchcraft. They believed that witches made pacts with the devil, gaining supernatural powers in exchange for their souls. This belief was not unique to Puritans. It was widespread throughout Europe and the American colonies during this period, often leading to persecution and witch hunts. The Salem witch trials began in the cold winter of early 1692 when two young girls, Betty Paris, the 9-year-old daughter of Reverend Samuel Paris, and her cousin, 11-year-old Abigail Williams, began exhibiting strange behavior. They screamed, contorted their bodies, uttered strange sounds, and spoke in tongues, baffling those around them. These fits and trances became increasingly severe and alarming, spreading to other young girls in the community. Local physician William Griggs examined them and, unable to find a physical cause, declared their behavior to be the result of witchcraft, or as he termed it, the evil hand. This diagnosis set off a chain reaction of fear and paranoia throughout the village. Soon, the girls accused 3 women of bewitching them: Tituba, a slave of Caribbean origin who worked in the Paris household; Sarah Good, a homeless beggar; and Sarah Osborne, an elderly woman who rarely attended church and had married her indentured servant. These women were easy targets due to their low social status and marginalized positions in the community. Interrogated under immense pressure, Tituba confessed to practicing witchcraft and, in a desperate attempt to save herself, claimed that more witches were operating in Salem. She described elaborate rituals and meetings with the devil, even mentioning a black book containing the names of other witches. Her confession, filled with vivid and terrifying details, fanned the flames of paranoia, setting the stage for a full-blown witch hunt. The accusations didn't stop with Tituba, Good, and Osborne. As fear spread like wildfire, more and more people were accused, often based on flimsy evidence or personal vendettas. Old grudges and rivalries played a significant role in the accusations. Land disputes, personal feuds, and jealousy often motivated one neighbor to accuse another. Among the accused were prominent members of the community, including Rebecca Nurse, a respected elderly woman known for her piety, and Martha Corey, who had openly criticized the trials and the accusers. Even a 4-year-old child, Dorothy Good, daughter of Sarah Good, was accused and imprisoned, spending months in a dark, damp cell chained to the wall. The trials were fueled by spectral evidence, testimony based on dreams and visions, which made it nearly impossible for the accused to defend themselves. Accusers would claim to see the specter or spirit of the accused tormenting them, and this was accepted as valid evidence in court. The afflicted girls would writhe and scream during the trials, claiming that the accused were attacking them spiritually. In May 1692, a special court known as the Court of Oyer and Terminer to hear and determine, was established to handle the growing number of witchcraft cases. The court was presided over by prominent figures, including Judge Samuel Sewall and Chief Justice William Stoughton, who were both deeply religious and committed to eradicating what they believed to be a real and present danger to the community. The court accepted spectral evidence as admissible, meaning that an accuser's visions of a person's spirit committing harmful acts were considered valid proof. This type of evidence was controversial even at the time, but it led to numerous convictions. The judges, deeply entrenched in Puritan beliefs, saw themselves as doing God's work by rooting out evil from the community. They believed they were engaged in a holy war against the forces of darkness. Public executions became spectacles, with large crowds gathering to witness the hangings of the accused on Gallows Hill. The condemned were denied proper burials, their bodies dumped in shallow graves, further adding to the suffering of their families and reinforcing the community's belief in their guilt. Religion was a driving force behind the trials, but politics also played a significant role. Salem Village was deeply divided by factions supporting different ministers and political figures. Reverend Samuel Parris, the minister of Salem at the time, was a particularly polarizing figure. His fiery sermons and strict enforcement of religious doctrine, coupled with his demands for greater compensation and control over church affairs, created divisions within the community. Many of his opponents found themselves accused of witchcraft, suggesting that the trials were used as a tool to silence dissent and consolidate power. The trials also occurred during a period of political instability. Massachusetts Bay Colony's charter had been revoked by the English crown, and a new one had not yet been established. This uncertainty created a power vacuum that contributed to the chaos and lack of proper governance in Salem. The absence of a stable legal framework allowed the trials to proceed with little oversight or regulation. By the fall of 1692, the hysteria began to wane. Doubts about the legitimacy of the trials grew as prominent figures, including influential minister Increase Mather, criticized the use of spectral evidence. He argued that it was better for 10 suspected witches to escape than for one innocent person to be condemned, a statement that resonated with many who had begun to question the proceeding. Governor William Phips eventually stepped in, influenced by the growing skepticism and the fact that his own wife had been accused. He dissolved the Court of Oyer and Terminer and prohibited further arrests for witchcraft. In January 1693, the remaining accused were released from prison, and those who had been convicted were pardoned. Although the trials were over, their impact lingered. Families of the victims struggled to rebuild their lives. Reputations were ruined, and the community of Salem was left deeply divided and scarred by the events. The social fabric had been torn apart, and it would take years for the wounds to heal. The Salem Witch Trials have puzzled historians for centuries. Several theories have been proposed to explain the mass hysteria that gripped Salem. Ergot poison. Some researchers believe that ergot, a fungus found in rye grain, may have caused the strange symptoms exhibited by the afflicted girl. Ergot poisoning can lead to hallucination, convulsion, and other symptoms that resemble those described in the historical accounts. This theory, however, remains controversial and is not universally accepted, as it does not fully explain the selective nature of the accusation or the social dynamics at play. Social tensions, class divisions, land disputes, and interpersonal rivalries likely contributed to the accusations. The trials provided an outlet for settling scores and eliminating rivals under the guise of purging evil. The existing social hierarchy was challenged, and the trials became a means of reasserting control. Religious fervor. The Puritans' strict religious beliefs created a climate where fear of the devil and witches could easily take hold. Their worldview, which emphasized the constant battle between good and evil, made them prone to seeing supernatural forces at work in everyday life. The intense religious environment, combined with the constant fear of sin and damnation, created a fertile ground for the seeds of suspicion and paranoia to sprout. Psychological factors. Mass hysteria and groupthink played a significant role in amplifying fear and paranoia. The power of suggestion and the desire to conform to the group likely influenced the behavior of the accusers and the community at large. The girl's initial fits may have been a form of adolescent rebellion or a cry for attention, which spiraled out of control as others joined in. Gender dynamics. The majority of those accused were women, reflecting the gender norms and biases of the time. Women who did not conform to the expected roles of submission and piety were often viewed with suspicion and were more likely to be accused of witchcraft. The trials can be seen as a manifestation of the patriarchal society's attempt to control and suppress women who deviated from the norm. The Salem Witch Trials serve as a cautionary tale about the dangers of mass hysteria, scapegoating, and injustice. In 1697, the Massachusetts General Court declared a day of fasting and soul-searching to atone for the tragedy. Judge Samuel Sewall publicly confessed his error and guilt for his role in the trials, an act of contrition that was rare for someone of his stature. In the centuries that followed, the trials became a symbol of the consequences of unchecked fear and power. They have been studied, analyzed, and dramatized in countless books, plays, and films, each generation seeking to understand how such a miscarriage of justice could have occurred. Arthur Miller's play The Crucible, written in the 1950s, used the Salem Witch Trials as an allegory for McCarthyism, highlighting the parallels between the two periods of mass hysteria and persecution. Today, the Salem Witch Trials continue to captivate the public imagination. Salem has embraced its history with museums, reenactments, and memorials honoring the victims. The trials serve as a reminder of the importance of critical thinking, due process, and the dangers of allowing fear to override reason. They underscore the need for a fair and impartial legal system and the protection of individual rights. The events in Salem also highlight the fragility of social order and the ease with which a community can be torn apart by fear and suspicion. The Salem Witch Trials were a dark chapter in American history, but they offer valuable lessons for the present and future. Whether fueled by fear, politics, religious zeal, or something more, the trials reveal the fragility of justice in the face of mass hysteria. As we reflect on this tragic episode, let us strive to prevent similar injustices and remember the human cost of fear and ignorance. The lessons of Salem call upon us to uphold the principles of justice, reason, and compassion in our own time, lest we repeat the mistakes of the past. We must remain vigilant against the forces of intolerance and prejudice, and work to build a society where reason and empathy prevail over fear and suspicion.